So, welcome back to this final session. You can see on here, we're going to hear a little bit about what happened in the breakout sessions. And here, we've had some more scribing going on, just to begin to capture some of those key elements. And I'll leave you to look at those while we hear from our session moderators. And just to recapitulate on what we've been talking about, really, we started the day hearing about standards as a consensus on what good looks like, as Scott called it. Their role, their key added value as enablers, and the vital importance of standards for companies' competitive edge, fostering innovation, creating value, and if you want to be a global player. The word that I think has come through most, and if you look on the scribing outside, and some of the scribing here, and one session is on that wall over there, there's still the word tool, standards as a tool, and a toolbox for people to use. This question, going back to the title of the day, of acting as a bridge between excellent science and products and services on the markets, and crucially, and certainly, and we'll hear in a minute, I hope, but in the sessions I was in, repeatedly, the importance of doing this early and at every stage in the innovation cycle. And lastly, we talked this morning quite a lot about awareness, and we talked about making standards fun, and we talked about making them sexy. And I don't know how many of you have seen this, but I just think these are really cool. These are publications produced by CEN-CENELEC, and they show you, this one is two guys who are having a good time, having a cool time, and for everything they are up to, it shows you that there's a standard for almost everything they do. There's another one about standards at work. I love this frazzled lady. That's how I sometimes feel at the end of a conference like this. So I think when you're looking to communicate the importance and the evidence of standards, I commend them to you, and if there are copies, I suggest you pick some up on your way out. But now, let me turn to the moderators of these sessions. Let me introduce them first. Karl Gruen, who is Director of Standardization at the Austrian Standards Institute, and he was moderating Back to Basics. Bardo Schettini Gerardini, Director of Legal Affairs in the CEN-CENELEC Management Center. He did Standards and IPR. Javier Garcia Diaz, a standards director at the Spanish Association for Standardization and Certification, and that was Market Access, was your topic. Knut Blind, chair of the STEO group for Innovation and Research Group for CEN-CENELEC. He was doing Horizon 2020. Ruggero Lensi, director for External Relations, New Business and Innovation at the Italian Institute for Standardization, and he was talking about standardization as a hidden competitive advantage. And Peter Churchill, advisor on scientific development to the Director General at the Joint Research Centre, who was focusing on that crucial issue of knowledge transfer. So welcome to you all. Thank you, first of all, for your services in the breakouts. And we just want to get a sense, what we're going to do, I'm just going to ask each of them just one question, get just some headlines. I should say there will be a conference report with much more detail about everything we've been discussing, I gather. It will be published on the website very soon, within a week or so. There will also be, some people have asked what happens to these scribing images. They will be photographed, they will also be put up. So there'll be lots more. This session is really just to get some headlines, and also if any of you want to add anything or comment on what you've heard. So let's crack on straight away. And Karl, as I say, you were doing the everything you ever wanted to know about standards but never dared to ask session, if I can put it that way. What were the most important elements in terms of perhaps, I don't know, myth-busting or misconceptions?
I think first out the three speakers and the whole audience, it was a great and amazing breakout session. We have spoken about who is drafting standards, who make the standards, and it was recognized that not the standards body, but the stakeholders are those who are drafting standards, and the process is characterized by its openness, it's transparent, it's inclusive, it's consensus-oriented, so very democratic. And of course, it takes time to reach consensus, so time to the market, and it was recognized that because there's always this misconception, it takes too much time for the development of standards is too lengthy. It depends on the needs of the market, and here we have a clear split voted. We have asked the audience, and they said half yes, half no. And by the way, because to make standards more attractive, there was also an analogy that standards should be seen like music, the diversity. I don't want to overstress. It would be nice to have a YouTube where some famous singers present the standards, like Robbie Williams or Rihanna or something like that. Nevertheless, we then came to the question to implement standards or to participate in standardization. And here we have seen a clear majority of people not agreeing that it's too costly for companies to participate in standardization or to implement standards. And it was generally recognized that participation in standardization is an investment. So it's taken as a strategic decision to participate in standardization, and it should be on the radar of every organization, standards and standardization.
Okay, thank you very much. And that investment point, I think, absolutely crucial. Interesting, you talked about music. In another session that I was in, we heard about standards described as the unsung hero. So we've had musical elements coming through everywhere. Bardo, you were talking about a topic which came up repeatedly this morning, the question of the relationship between patents and standards, and are they mutually exclusive? Can they be used in combination? What were the key issues, the key barriers identified in your session, and what conclusion did you come to?
Yes, well, actually, definitely, I mean, there are drivers, but also there are some barriers, and definitely, I mean, cost is one of the barriers that have been identified for both, actually, managing, let's say, patents, but as well as participating in standardization activities. However, even for small companies, they can really take a great benefit in participating in standardization activities as well as managing patents, and that was clearly showed by Laurent, I mean, one of our speakers. And we were not just referring to those essential patents that you have within standards, but also to those patents that companies may use and sell in, let's say, in providing innovative services to customers when they need to apply to standards. So not directly linked within a standard, but linked to a standard. And that, I think, it's a really an important message. We also tackle a bit the issue of strategic, let's say, approach from companies. Even small companies need to have a strategy and a views on how to combine the two. But as well as the timely use of patents when you are participating into a standardization process activities is important, because, and that is really a big important message, don't disclose your innovation without having prior filling it in a patent, because if you do it, then you cannot really have a patent on this innovation. So be careful about that. Then I would say, as a last message, we have a pretty good and sophisticated system in Europe that works quite well. I mean, and there are lots of cooperation with the European Patent Office and the standard organizations as well. Now, we know that there are issues. There are problems, the system is not perfect, but has worked, I mean, on very well, I mean, the last few years in any case. So don't be shy, don't be afraid. Run very good cost analysis if you decide to go on patents and to link them with standards. And in any case, CEN-CENELEC are there to help. So, contact us if you need any advice.
Thank you very much indeed. Javier, market access, of course, this is an absolutely crucial issue when we talk about moving from excellent science to products and services on the markets. What were the key challenges identified in your group and some of the ways of addressing them?
Yes, in fact, this is how we started the session, referring to this market access concept was probably one of the most mentioned in the morning session. The three main messages were, first of all, there was some evidence from already ongoing studies on which is the topics for which integrating standardization in projects would benefit the most, and this was for innovation linked to new technologies. That is not basic research, but innovating on technologies already existing to evolve in the market. In relation to this, we had a very good example, in particular in Europe, of the relation between these new technologies and the regulatory framework in which they take place, and how the research from projects can contribute to update already existing standards or to develop new standards for products covered by regulation. The second topic was the one related to transforming a research project into a business, and for that we clearly identified that the production of standards or standards-related documents provide trust and confidence to potential customers in order to facilitate the deployment of these new businesses. The third message was the one related to the creation of new markets, emerging markets, and how the development of standardization works in the frame of R&D projects could contribute to lower entry barriers to new markets by, as I said before, by generating this trust and confidence in these new products. Lastly, as a kind of summary, there was a clear message emphasizing the critical role of industry as a key contributor to these projects, and the need for especially technology centers and leaders of projects to get involved with industry and to get industry involved both in the development of the projects themselves, but as well in the standardization activities that may be generated as an output of the project.
So that market-driven approach, absolutely central to success. Knut, you were talking about Horizon 2020. What did you draw out? And I should say for our second three chairs, they've had about 5 minutes to think about the outcomes of their session, so this is very unfair. But what for you were the key messages that came out in terms of how researchers can work with Horizon 2020, what they need to bear in mind, how they can benefit from the opportunities it opens up?
Yeah, the session was really about opportunities. I really framed a little bit the whole session by introducing this integrated approach, which was more or less the starting point for also the really very prominent role now of standardization in Horizon 2020. And Lime from DG Transport really came up with some specific examples in his area of FP7 projects and also showing what's going on regarding Horizon 2020 of the opportunities for standardization in his field, also of some really very specific outcomes of technical specification of European standards on noise reduction, for example, very specific. This is more the money side. Then we had Karl Gruen from DIN who presented the infrastructure at the standardization side, which is able to help researchers to really then do the standardization work in collaboration with the standards bodies at the European and the national level especially. And finally, and this is a little bit the other way around, standards and standardization require also research. And Kamal from MPL introduced this really big program, Ampere, which allows standards bodies and technical committees to get funding for solving metrology problems. And this is a little bit a last kind of puzzle stone to complete the integrated approach. And my kind of main conclusion was really, now we have the opportunities. There's some funding, there the infrastructure. Now the research community has to take the opportunities. Okay. Otherwise, the opportunity will be gone.
So we go back to the just do it. Grab it and do it. Ruggero, from your point of view, this standards as a strategic choice, it was mentioned this morning by Christian Renaudot immediately as he said it was core to their strategy. Patrice described it as a weapon. What was the discussion in your session about A, why it's so important for strategy, and B, how to really make it part of a strategy?
Yes, that was exactly the discussion that we had, and it was very interesting. I must admit I learned a lot in this session. And the fact that standardization should be part of the strategy, the answer is yes. And why? And the answer is because yes. In fact, we focus much more on how.
Yeah.
It's not the question to yes and to why, but to how. And we analyze that, that very different ways in order to be involved in standardization. You can just comply, use standards used for external purpose, relation with stakeholders, your supplier, customers, and for internal purpose. But obviously you can also have an active participation directly at European, international level, or even at national level by the mirroring approach. And more than that, you can have leadership, you can be an initiator, and we focus a lot on this point, because when to start a standardization is really a strategic approach when a company can decide it's the right moment to initiate standardization, especially when you are focused with innovative product. So the relation between research, innovation, and starting the standardization has been focused in this session. And the outcome of this is that, first of all, the approach must be, could be the same for big companies and for SMEs. Secondly, you need a kind of management, of an assessment, because there is not a solution, one for everything. It's depending on the company, it's depending on your core business, different topics, the market, the resources, obviously. And it depends on, you want to be interested on products, on services, on management approach, and so on. So you have to, first of all, consider to assess how to considering the strategic approach to standardization from one side. And secondly, you have to manage, because when you have decided to participate in a way or in another in the different topics, you have to manage continually, know what is happening with your experts, be in a position to provide the right message and the right policy to be given to your experts. So it's really a kind of new type of management system. How to manage standardization approach in a company. And that was some kind of interesting output of this session, because we have lots of standards on management system, and there is this very interesting also new activity of ISO on the innovation management. And why not to have a management system for companies, for organizations, in order how to manage strategic approach to standardization. I would just like to finish by giving some advice that have been provided by the experts who participate to this session, and I would like to thank them absolutely a lot. The first is related to SMEs. The advice was to work in a network view, to be in a position to approach standardization and innovation with other SMEs, maybe also with big companies. The second advice is for research, for the research system, and is to consider really to add the standardization strategy in a combination of the patent strategy within the research companies. And the last one, it was an advice for all standardizers, for all experts, that there is a big benefit to participate to standardization, is the possibility, the unique, real possibility to have a benchmarking of other companies and to share and to have a look at what is happening.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask the rest of you what you identified as the most important piece of advice that came out of your session. But before we do that, Peter, knowledge transfer, a crucial issue at the core of what we're talking about, the barriers, and how do we tackle them?
Well, let's start with the good news first.
Absolutely.
I think we should start with the good news. And the good news is I think we saw a lot of evidence from different spheres, from graphene to metallurgy to environmental monitors, that there really is a strong feeling that there is a benefit of transferring the knowledge from science to the market through standards. You really start to bridge the gap between the scientific community and the marketable industrial community. So that, I think, was points very, very well made by our different speakers. Barriers, there were a number, and I think they're all quite addressable, but there were a number. The first one is basically knowledge. We talk about knowledge transfer, but to have knowledge transfer, you have to have a community that knows they have to transfer something to something. And there was a general consideration that a large proportion of the scientific community is not aware enough of the need for standards, the benefit for standards, what can be gained by participating in the standardization community. So I think there's a big awareness raising issue there that we can follow. Second issue that was raised was one of recognition. If you want to have this knowledge transfer from the research and science community into the standardization community, scientists live by recognition. Recognition traditionally comes from scientific papers. If you really want to have this flow of knowledge from science into standards, and I think it is entirely beneficial for both sides to do so, you have to give recognition to the scientists. You have to give them some kind of, and an S index was suggested, a standardization index, which can be used by funding agencies, which can be used by peers, by universities, as a way of recognizing that involvement. And I think if you do that, that will really open the floodgates. Other points that were made was also we considered beyond standards, because standardization is not just about making a standard, and some of the other tools which standardization organizations have, such as technical reports, workshop agreements, and so on, for a scientist are much more attractive, because it's a way of getting your scientific results into the standardization community quite quickly without going through the entire process. And the last point is really, and I completely agree with what Ruggero just said, it's about timing. And I think timing is key. I mean, there's a lot of talk about speeding up the standardization process and so on. Okay, it's the point, I have no comment. But if you can identify scientific issues earlier in the process, at the appropriate moment, and bring it into the standardization community at the appropriate moment, you can save years in the standardization
And would that be the strongest piece of advice to emerge as well?
That would be the strongest piece of advice to
strike
emerge.
early, strike hard. Any other strong pieces of advice? Knut?
Yeah, I'd like to combine a little bit Peter's and your contribution. You said coordinate patenting and standardization, and Peter brought in the issue of scientific publication. I think we have to think in a triangle, and the triangle is publishing, patenting, and standardization. This is a triangle which you have to really bring to this scientific community, because they are thinking in these in the moment only in two dimensions, just publishing and patenting, but the third one we have to bring in and to show how this works. We had in the IPR session, and since I'm from Fraunhofer, I have to really now be proud that the patent on MP3 and the MP3 standard really led to the end, overall, to €1 billion to the Fraunhofer Society. Yeah? Yeah. Just to make the figure clear, yeah? This is a lot of money. And without this money, Fraunhofer's model wouldn't work. Yeah? There is a link, and it's very difficult, and we were never successful to repeat that. Yeah? This is one link, which is well known. There are many studies and many fights. But what we did, we had a very interesting study on biotech, where we see also a relationship between scientific publication and standards. That means if the people are able to bring their scientific knowledge, leading edge knowledge, into standards, they are much higher cited at the end. And this is the thing what researchers are out for. That means there are also synergies, but they are not really known to the scientific community.
So there's two things. So there's the lessons that we learn from those great success stories and the advice. Any other important pieces of advice? Javier?
Yes, I think as a kind of a summary of what happened in our session, probably the best piece of advice would be in line with what was already mentioned in the presentation from the ACFA CEO this morning. In order to reduce the risk related to the incorporation into the market of new products, of new services, of innovations, the earlier you get involved in the standardization better, in the standardization system, the better. So, and this is in the research projects. So the earlier you get involved in R&D projects and you identify your needs for standardization and you know which standards are already in place, the better market access your innovation will have.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much. Bardo?
Yeah, well, I really would like just to add, because I think that more or less all of us, we have mentioned somehow, I mean, directly or indirectly, you know, a strategic approach, a strategic view, a long-term view, you know, on, from those participating in standardization activities. And this is especially true for patents. I mean, what we have also learned is that, you know, you can, I mean, share knowledge of innovative solutions, which doesn't imply, you know, patents, but I mean, really just a shared knowledge can also be a way through which a company can secure the market for itself. So, but this, of course, needs to you know, for those participating in standardization activities, they need to have, you know, a strategic view in order to do it in a proper way. Yeah. So this is definitely one of the.
So it's all joined up thinking, gentlemen. It's working marvelously. Karl?
Yeah. Exactly, support what has been said. If you approach standardization, standards, innovation, do it as a strategic approach. Yeah. So first, as a SWOT analysis, but don't focus only on the costs, on the investment, because there's always a return on investment. Elaborate a roadmap. We have seen a wonderful presentation in the breakout session where you start really from terminology issues, that the people are aware what they are speaking about. What is, for example, nanotechnology. Very simple things. Then go to test methods and so on, till you have very stable solutions then to be brought on the market, and then you have the market.
Okay, thank you very much. We don't have long. Did you want to come in, Ruggero? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I want to come in because before there were the advices of the expert, but I also have
Okay,
advice.
your piece of advice.
Yes.
Good. Excellent.
And it's very simple. Today we are speaking about more standardization in innovation.
Yep.
And I'm asking also more innovation in standardization.
Okay, so it works both ways round. Thank you so much. We don't have long, and there's one more thing I want to ask our moderators in a moment, but does anybody have, you've listened to the summaries, and as I say, it was only headlines, but is there, for example, anyone in this room who thinks, but I made an utterly brilliant point in my session, and I can't think why nobody's mentioned it in this feedback session, or a comment indeed to what you've heard? And then I'm going to try and put the panel on the spot. Kamal, please.
I think I'm just going to make one comment, and that is that over the last 3 or 4 years, it's really very impressive how standardization has become much higher profile than it used to be. So the fact that in Horizon 2020 and other areas, we keep standards is now a sung hero in Horizon 2020 terms. And I think CEN-CENELEC must have done a tremendous job. So the next question from me, or comment, how are you going to double that?
Yep. And your answer? That's yeah, it's easy to go on.
We work together while we may be able to get more.
Okay. So how are we going to redouble it? Let's come back and unless there are any other really burning points, let us come back and ask that question. We've come a long way. How are we going to redouble it? How are we going to get there? And if I could, just a thought from each of you. You've been listening to the discussion all day in your own sessions, but also in other sessions. Is there anything, what's been most striking for you? What has been the most interesting, perhaps an angle maybe you didn't expect to feature so prominently, or something that's not been mentioned that you would have expected? Karl.
Yes, what really struck me was we have asked the audience, who of you have interacted with standardization bodies? And I have to say, only half of the audience interacted with standardization bodies. So that is a clear message to the standardization bodies, irrespective European, national or international, to go to the people, to engage with the stakeholders, to tell them what the message, so really back to the core business, but out of the office.
Okay, so we go back to that raising awareness that we've talked about all day. Bardo, did you want to add something?
For me, I mean, one of the most striking things is to see these, I mean, I would say, such a big audience Which means that basically innovation, standardization is really high in the agenda of many people, many organizations. And this, I think, is really a success of what we are doing.
So you have the springboard to double the effort that Kamal, it's already there. We have the springboard, we just now need to use that awareness.
We have to be ambitious in any case, so that's...
Knut, I think you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I'd like to support this observation because first 5 or 10 years ago, we would have 50 people here. That means we are at least, according to registration, we are 10 times already above this situation. And very interesting, and I think this is a very good sign, is there are many people who are not yet connected to the system. Yeah? And it's good that you are here. Because this is broadening the base, and I also I'm very happy that the Germans are in the minority. Because we have a little bit of privilege in Germany with different funding opportunities, and that so many other countries are here in order to broaden that also to the new member states in the eastern
So you benefit from more public money than most do, perhaps, is it? Or
in Germany, there is some additional funding in parallel to the European, which is also bridging some gaps we still face here at the European level.
Thank you, Peter. I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think I come back to the what's the springboard for doubling it, and maybe what the eye-opening moment for me is the untapped potential, particularly in the scientific community, and I think if we can tap that just a little bit more, the flow of interest will be enormous, and I think this is a huge potential.
And how, doing what I did to Kamal, so I'll only be fair, how do you tap it? How do you?
I think the first thing for me is recognition. You give the scientists recognition, and self-interest will do the rest.
Okay. Ruggero and Javier?
Yes, it is in fact linked of what I just heard about the potential that we have. I would like to come back. You asked this morning a question about who knows in the room about standardization and innovation, and they were all green. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I would like in the future to have such a conference and to see all red. And this is a challenge, not an easy challenge for us, because that's right, that maybe 10 years ago we would have 50, and now we have 500. But we should have 500 red, and it's a big challenge for us.
Yeah. So in the end, I mean, we focused, as you say in your session, it wasn't so much the why was a key, as it were, it was the how, and that's what we focused on a lot today, but we need to get more of those who don't see the why in the future. Javier?
Well, I think definitely in order to not double but increase what is necessary is, and it was mentioned this morning, I think it was the lady right here in front of me, it's education about the standardization, and it's the ensuring that the next generation of professionals is aware about this tool, is aware about the role it plays for any type of organization, be it industry, private companies, be it regulators, policymakers, but definitely education for the next generation of professionals is key.
Absolutely, core issue. Good.
Since I'm also a university professor, I really like to support that because here there's a lot to do, and whereas in Germany we have nice funding, at the situation at the universities is not very promising. It means there is not really a lot of going on, and therefore there has to be more effort. And I think we at the end, thinking in the European paradigms, we have the knowledge triangle, and knowledge triangle includes also education.
Yeah.
Yeah, and therefore it's for this topic it's key.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our moderators and the speakers of the sessions and all of you for your contributions. Thank you, gentlemen. You may return to the comfy seats. Thank you also for your help with the preparation.